All right, welcome back to the Misfit Nation. If you're feeling overwhelmed or floating towards the darkness, do not hesitate to phone a friend. If you're embarrassed that you're having a difficult time, call the Veteran Crisis Line at 1-800-273-8255 and take option 1. That's 1-800-273-8255, option 1. Again, we have told you many times over the last year, do not make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you've not had the chance, check out our first book, 13-Step Guide to Success. It is available in paperback and Kindle editions through Amazon. If you're new, thanks for joining us. And be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast apps. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, _Misfit Nation. So you'll stay up to date on all of our episodes and as they're released, while also having the opportunity to getting to hear the stories of our amazing guests. Speaking of which, our next guest is the founder of the Toronto-based street food brand, Fidel Gastro's, which within 4 years went from an underground sandwich pop-up to an internationally recognized food brand. Now, almost a decade later, he has a still growing business of food experiences, restaurant consulting, and food content creation. He always strives to be different in an industry steeped in tradition. So without further ado, let's welcome to the Misfit Nation, Matt Basile. How are you, Matt?
Good, buddy. How are you?
Awesome. Great Monday here. Hopefully the weather's treating you right where you are.
It was beautiful yesterday. I'm in Toronto, so okay. It was like, and by beautiful I mean it was 12 degrees Celsius. But today it's snowing again, so we're in that point of our seasonality where it can be really nice one day and then legit winter the next day. So you just take it with strides.
You take what you're given each day and smile and wave. That's all you can do.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like I said, it was beautiful yesterday. So it's funny because when the weather is so nice here, and we've had one of the worst winters probably in my lifetime. So there was just people out everywhere. And you know, I live in an area that has a lot of dogs, and yeah, dogs walking. Everyone's in a good mood, and today it's exact opposite.
Everyone's gloomy today. Yesterday they were happy. Yeah, dogs don't want to be outside now.
No, exactly.
Awesome. So Matt, if you don't mind, just please let the audience know a little bit about yourself from as far back as you want to go to how you got to the food industry to where we are now.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to slice that. I'm an entrepreneur in the food business. I've been doing this for about 11 years now. I was pretty young when I started. So I was about 26 or 27 when I decided that I was going to start my own company. And really it came from two things. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I wanted to be self-employed. And I kind of given myself a timeline. Like by the time I was 30, I had said I wanted to be self-employed. And then the only thing I really knew how to do was cook. So, and then, I mean, obviously there's a little more to that. So prior to that, I was working in ad agencies. I was a copywriter. So I was working in an environment that was, you know, highly creative, very, very focused on brainstorming and coming up with solutions in a creative way. But I don't know what it was. I had a very hard time connecting with my job every day. Like, and I actually just the other day articulated it a couple of weeks ago to my better half's cousin. I was saying that I wanted a job, or I wanted a role in my career where I didn't wake up as one person, go to work as a different person, and come back home and be another person. Like I wanted there to be a constant integration of my character throughout my day. Like I didn't want to have to change. I didn't want to have to, and it was less so when I was working in ad agencies and more so when I was like 26, I was working client side now, which wasn't as creative. I was wearing dress pants every day. And I'm like, I'm not used to wearing dress pants. There's little things like that. Like I remember just taking the elevator up to the 32nd floor and I'm like, oh my God, like this isn't really, and nothing against the people or the place. It just wasn't like for me. So every night I would go home and I was starting to brainstorm what my little project would be. And that was this food company called Fidel Gastro. So that's where it all kind of started. Originally, the idea was to start it as a brick and mortar sandwich shop, right? It was, and I used the Cuban sandwich because pulled pork was popular at the time, but the Cuban sandwich was kind of a new take on that. So I put together an entire business plan on this idea, surrounded by Cuban sandwiches and Cuban styled sandwiches. The flat top press, the low and slow cooked meats, and done in a variety of different flavors and different proteins. And then, I'd spent a year kind of developing the business plan. So everything from the branding for it and the recipes for it, my sales platform and my strategies there. And I even had, real estate picked out, and it was thorough. It was a full business plan. I was very proud of it. It was about 45 pages long. And I remember I got myself a meeting at the bank. I'm very excited about that. I was in there maybe 5 minutes and I got rejected. Because I had no experience.
Right.
I had zero experience other than working butcher shops as a kid growing up, or the breakfast shift in university. I had no restaurant experience at all. And I also had no equity or money. So it was pretty easy. Like when you're in a financial institution where you're just making decisions based on yes or no, and categorically, it's like, well, I didn't check any of the boxes for them. So it was like it was a no. And that was a huge eye opener for me, because I was like, in advertising, specifically on the creative side, sometimes you're used to having a really good idea that never sees the light of day, and for whatever reason. And this kind of felt like that. But then 2 weeks later, I had already put the idea aside. I figured this was kind of, not going to be on my future. And I was at a party, in the beaches area of Toronto, which is a very cool part of the city. It's right by the water. All the houses have been built perfectly for home entertaining, so for having parties at them. So I'm at this house, and it was hosted by a few friends of mine in the music industry here. So they had a DJ booth at the party, and they had a bar at the party, and they had people doing, like rap battles and break dancing. Like it was quite a lively little get together. And then they were going to order food. And then instead of doing that, they were like, hey, Matt, what if we just pay you to make some food for us if you want? And you can go through our fridge and do whatever you want. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. I'm down. This is what I do. And next thing you know, like a couple people were watching me do it. And then, 5 people were watching me cook, and then 10 people were watching me cook. And next thing you know, the energy that we brought to the kitchen became an extension of the party. And that's when I thought that was probably where the business could take me, with very little capital. And it was purely based on an idea and a hunch. Little did I know that I could, where we would go from there. And I was very much fortunate that I was able to take that evening, use that, apply that to the existing business plan I had. I reconfigured it to be more of an experientially based food concept. So not dependent on a sign or a door, but more on a vibe and an energy. And that's exactly what I did. About a month after that, I launched my first event, and there was a few hundred people there. And from there, it was food trucks and TV shows and cookbooks and restaurants. And it's 11 years later, or almost 11 years later. It's hard to even remember everything we've done and accomplished. But it's been a journey of both a lot of, I always tell people, when you're an entrepreneur, and especially in the food business, it's such an, it is an all-consuming industry. Your highs are super high, but your lows can be super low as well, because it takes a lot out of you, and it takes a lot to make something out of literally nothing.
Well, definitely. And it's an awesome journey that you've been on, not having a school taught chef background like most people would think you'd have to get into the industry to be a chef or to be a food service kind of guy. It kind of makes me think of the movie Chef, when he opens up the food truck, but he actually had school training doing the Cuban sandwiches and such. And that was about the same time, I think, 10 years ago when that came out. You were already doing it, so that's pretty awesome.
It's funny you mentioned that movie specifically. I was actually the Toronto ambassador for the movie when it came out. And so I was doing a bunch of promotional stuff for the movie when it came out. And I remember when I went to go see the sneak preview, I'm bawling my eyes out, because it was like my life had been captured in a 2.5-hour snapshot. And I actually other than there were specific things that were huge fabrications, But for the most part, they actually did a really good job capturing the effort and the energy suck that it takes to launch something that's so nitty gritty and hands on.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was just thinking about that movie and eating a Cuban sandwich at the same time, because the
Right? Yeah.
whole things are amazing. And I was reading your bio earlier, and I seen that you had Italian grandparents. Did they have any influence in your cooking styles, or was that just off the cuff? Let's go cook.
So they taught me a couple things. They taught me my work ethic first and foremost. They were born and raised in Italy, had moved to Canada when they were already adults, and I was so lucky that both of my parents worked full-time jobs, so they essentially would take care of me around the hours of school, etc. And I really did learn my value system from them, and that's an education that I'll never lose that. That's ingrained in my DNA forever. That's I think my grandfather, for better or worse, always taught me that your work ethic is really something that no one can take away from you. It doesn't matter if you're right all the time or wrong all the time, or maybe the job isn't perfect, but if you prove to people that you want to be there because you've put that effort in, that will stand for something. So that's something they definitely taught me. They also taught me the value of appreciating things made from scratch. So whether or not the actual recipes came from them, and some did, some didn't. Some things, not all. I wouldn't consider myself an Italian chef at all as far as like my style of cuisine. I really do pull from my experiences in travel and the flavors that I really love. I love to cook over live fire. I love brunch. I love Italian food, but I also love Southeast Asian food, and I love Latin American food. And I find a way to kind of Canadianize that, Americanize that in certain kind of palettes. But really what it came down to with them was quality ingredients, making sure that the flavor of your food can shine through everything you're doing, even if it's quote unquote, from my standpoint, gimmicky. It's got to taste good too, and that's something that I learned from them. For both my Italian grandparents, being able to feed somebody was a currency. So
Right.
You weren't really necessarily measured by, sure, success is having money in the bank, of course, but it was also your ability to provide for your family in a variety of ways, right? And I think anyone that came post-war era, like that was a huge deal, right? Like being able to put food on the table for your family every single day. And I take such pride and joy out of feeding people, whether it's feeding friends and family at a get together, whether it's doing charitable initiatives through food, because there is an abundance of charitable initiatives that require providing food for services, and then also just selling food to people. And I don't take I've sold thousands of sandwiches, thousands. And I still have a great connection with a lot of people that have purchased a sandwich off me. It's never lost on me. If someone has taken the time, like the two biggest meals I've always kind of wrapped my head around was, and this was specifically when I had my restaurant here in downtown Toronto, but I always remembered doing New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. So we would do a big New Year's Eve dinner party with like a DJ and stuff. And then I would always do a big New Year's Day brunch the next day. And there was always such a big thing for me that, wow, you chose me to be your last meal of the year. This is the way you wanted to end your year in food, was through a meal that I cooked for you. And then the other one was, wow, you wanted to start your year off with my meal. Like that's such an honor. I'm so honored to have and privileged to have that title. So those were two things that were never lost on me, was that opportunity to feed people.
And that's definitely something that my grandparents also came from Italy, but pre-war. And so they went through like the Depression and such like that. But they always taught us that through food, family grows. So every Sunday was the whole family over makeshift tables, because they didn't have huge tables back then. It was like this table, that table, all put together. And the kids, we sat where we could in the corner, but you had everything that was put out. And my grandmother, she would have food going from the moment we walked in until we left, and you can barely move when you left, but Everyone was
Totally.
happy. It was amazing.
And that Sunday meal is it is culturally ingrained in not just Italians, but a lot of European families and just families from different cultures from around the world. It was it's funny because I actually remember vividly when I was in grade school. So I would have been about maybe 10 or 11. And I was lucky that my grandparents, their house was just blocks away from the school that I went to. So I was, so lucky that I didn't have to eat lunch at school. I got to go to my grandparents' house every day for lunch.
Nice.
And it would be penne and fettuccine with, red sauce and vinegar peppers and veal cutlets and salad. Like it was a multi-course thing. This is lunch. Okay. I had to then go back to school and not fall asleep. But I remember one day the kid across the street from me he must have been a fourth generation Canadian boy. Okay. He was like, his mom asked me, "Hey, Matt, why don't you come over to our house for lunch today? And we'll have lunch. And then you can swim in the pool after," because it was like warm. It was like June. I was like, "Oh, wow. Like you can finish eating in 20 minutes and enjoy the pool before you go." Like, I was having a hard time wrapping my head around that. So I'll never forget the meal. It was grilled cheese sandwich on white bread with processed cheese, canned tomato soup, and a glass of milk. And I was like, "What is this? Like, your tomato sauce tastes funny." Like I had a hard time wrapping my head around it. But the meal was not even secondary, tertiary. Yeah, you hurry up and eat so you can jump in the pool and spend as much time in the pool. I'll never forget the next day, I went back to my Nono and Nana's house for lunch. And they were asking me, "How was lunch at Kevin's?" And I said what we ate, and they gave me this look like, "What is that?" And then I'll never forget, I was saying, I go, "No, they have a swimming pool there. Your backyard's even bigger. You could put an even bigger swimming pool back there." And he was like, "And get rid of my garden?" He was like, "You know how much that swimming pool costs them every year?" He's like, "You know how much money I save with this garden every year?" And like, when you're 10 years old, you have no idea what any of that means.
Right.
And it's years later as an adult, you're like, "No, was right. They were right."
They were on to something. The fig trees,
Yeah.
the tomato plants, the Basile, everything in the backyard. It was amazing.
Everything. My grandfather even had wine grapes. I'll never forget that. He would have to sit out there sometimes with a shovel to protect it from the birds, and I'll never forget when this is how I knew spring, summer were coming, because you could actually go to the grape, eat the flesh out of the skin, and then drink the juice in the skin, and then eat it was like a 3-step process. You didn't just put the grape in your mouth. You ate the flesh, drank the juice, ate the skin, and continued on.
Outstanding. And that's the good life though, right there. And that gave you your foundry for everything you're doing now, I believe. I've also seen that the names of your food truck were Priscilla 1, Priscilla 2, and then your brick and mortar is Lisa Marie. Is that homage to Elvis?
It is, but accidentally. So, so my very first event I ever did, I was setting up my table, and I was selling just sandwiches off of the table. So the table was really my kitchen, and the table looked a little empty. So I went to a little knickknack store, and I was like, "What can I get? What little tchotchke can I get to fill my table up?" And they had an Elvis bust there. So I'm like, "Okay, you know what? This is cool. I'm going to buy the Elvis bust." So I bought the Elvis bust, put it on the table. Let me tell you something. That was the talk of the night, was this Elvis bust. Like, people were taking selfies with it. Like, and this is like still like maybe first generation iPhone era. Like, you know what I mean? So people were like, selfies were still a little grainy. A lot of Blackberries out there still floating around. But so the next event that I kind of advertised, people were messaging me being like, "You're bringing the Elvis bust, right?" And I was like, I guess I am. For whatever reason, the Elvis motif continued, because when I bought my food truck, I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? Fidel Gastro is the brand for the food truck." But someone's like, "Yeah, but you got to name the vehicle just like you would name a boat." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Why don't we name it Priscilla?" And that was kind of the natural name for it. And everyone's like, "Yeah, it makes sense." And the bus would come out. And then when that truck died and I got a new truck, I was like, "Yeah, you know what? Priscilla 2 makes sense." And I even got the Elvis bus painted on the side of the truck this time because I kept going through Elvis Bus. They kept breaking. So I was like, you know what, now I'm just going to get one painted right on here so I can't lose it anymore. And then when it came time to, when we were launching our restaurant, Lisa Marie, we were in such a, you know, when they say like, you don't know what you don't know. Well, I didn't know how to open up a restaurant until I was in the middle of opening up a restaurant. And like really when we were searching for one, it was also like I had a TV show following me around simultaneously. And really all I was looking for was a central kitchen to prep and get ready for all my food truck events and business. Like I wasn't looking for a kitchen. And a restaurant. A friend of mine was like, hey, I got the perfect kitchen right downtown. He's like, there's one catch. I go, what's the catch? He goes, there's a restaurant attached to it. So I was like, okay, well, that's cool. Like maybe the kitchen was big enough to kind of facilitate two aspects of the business. I could do, you know, food truck and catering prep and also facilitate the restaurant because it was a huge kitchen. It was too big actually for just servicing the restaurant. So I'd come up with this like little this concept that was more like, you know, trendy bar food that had like international flavors. And I was like, but you know what? I can't name it Fidel Gastro's because to be honest, it's not the same brand. It's a different vibe altogether. And I was like, well, you know, it's kind of a product of the two worlds I'm in. Why not just name it Lisa Marie? And I just kind of said the name out loud and everyone was like, beauty, that's the name. And coincidentally, that same year, there was a huge uptick in very feminine named restaurants. So restaurants named after women. And I was like, it was never planned. I was like, you know what? And then over the years, we'd actually put the word bar in front of it. So it was Bar Lisa Marie. But yeah, it's just wild how things happen.
That's a great coincidence, and awesome how that happened just by buying the bus to add flavor to a party, and then bam, that becomes the nuance for everything as you move forward.
It was the little details, you know, that was always a throwback to my days in advertising, telling a story and having a narrative kind of, you know, personified through either food or characters or icons within the space. It's what allows you to be memorable for people. And, you know, but none of that matters if your food sucks. So it's kind of like, you need to have both worlds. And I was so lucky that over the 7, 8, now 10, 11 years of my career, my food has only gotten better every single year. So the popularity of our brand has allowed me the moments to improve my quality of food for people. And now I feel like, you know, at 37, at 37, you know, this is the best my food has ever been, the most sound the brand has ever been. And the way we approach projects just makes a lot of sense. And it's allowed me to now evolve my skill set in very different ways, because my biggest fear was, you know, the food industry, specifically like the restaurant and hospitality industry, it can be very much, you know, a creature of habit space. And I wanted to ensure that if I was starting something that was proprietary, you know, that was my own, that we never felt like we were just doing the same thing on repeat every day, that it wasn't just a carbon copy of the day before, you know. So that was a huge thing for me. So once it got to that place, that's when I was like, okay, I'm done with the restaurant because I've checked all my boxes and I'm good now. And it's allowed me to kind of pull back a bit and approach food as more of on a project by project basis.
I mean, that's awesome. It's awesome that you have the ability to do that now. 10 years ago, you probably didn't think this would happen, and now the roller coaster has taken you to new heights. And that showed like one of our core values here at Misfit Nation is motivation. And you showed earlier in your career as you were in advertising that you were not really motivated there anymore. You lost that sense, that oompa, to get the aha moment, to get up every morning and say, I want to do this. And then you found it when you came into this, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. I'd love to see where it is in 10 years from now.
Hopefully I'm retired. No, I would love to slow down a bit. This has actually been you know, the last 2 months have been the slowest I've ever moved. And when I say the slowest I ever moved, I'm used to being like 14 to 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I'm up and I'm out the door, and that's it. I haven't stopped. So I really wanted to, I've been using the terminology of being dialed in more. I wanted to use this year, because the last couple of years have been very awkward, obviously, in our industry. So I wanted to use this time to dial in more and be more present and focus on moments versus being the guy known for doing 14 different things at one time. And to your point, I am very lucky that I have that opportunity to take a step back and approach my career in a different way now. And not everyone in my industry has that same opportunity. So it's never lost on me, even for a moment, that this is kind of my job now.
Definitely. And you're definitely right. The last 2 years, you either made or broke a lot of people in the food service industry. A lot of the brick and mortar places could not survive because they couldn't have people on those tables. Butts and seats really is what gets those things going. I think you lose about $10,000 a month if you don't have those seats filled per seat. And that really kills the industry as well as the employees you have working there. So I think you able to slow down a little bit and reach back and still be productive during these 2 years was actually really motivational to others that are watching you from afar.
Well, that means a lot to me. And by no means am I any sort of, second coming. I was very lucky. I'm a very lucky individual. I saw where the industry was kind of going pre-COVID. I saw, and I can only speak from from where I am in the city of Toronto, right? Like, and I'm not exactly sure where you are geographically, but like the city of Toronto is a very expensive city. It's very, it's right up there with the Miamis and the New Yorks and the Chicagos, as far, not just for restaurants, but just overall cost of living, cost of operating a small business. So for me, given the kind of food that I'll never forget the moment I knew I was ready to start changing times. It was that my tiny little restaurant had now doubled in rent, and I was selling 4-piece fried chicken for $28 and a beer for $9. You know what I mean? And I was like, and Canadian food costs are astronomically higher than American food costs. I was just down in Florida at Costco, and I was like, woo, filling up that cart. Because even with the dollar exchange, it was still, drastically cheaper. So I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, Florida, filling up the cart at Costco. So I remember in that moment, that's when I was like, I think I need to have a bit of a shift in how I'm doing business. When COVID hit, I tried to scale back. I mean, I had to scale back because everything scaled back. But when COVID hit, I really became like a one-person operation again. I kept one employee on full time. She helped me organize my thoughts and my process. So she handled all the admin. I handled all the food, and like it was like going, not door-to-door sales, but like if there was a way to sell food, I figured out a way to do it. I would make a bunch of food and sell it, sliced smoked meats, vacuum packed in markets. And then I was selling rib dinners that you could come pick up. And then on Sundays, I was doing meatballs and polenta you could come pick up. I was delivering them myself, so I really did. And then as the seasons changed, things obviously opened up again. So I opened up a couple little, QSRs, but I was working nonstop. Like, for me to say it was the hardest 2 years, and by hardest I mean like the most hours I put into my craft in the last 2 years than I had in the previous 10 years. It says a lot, because I had been working a lot those 10 years too. So now, 2 years later, I was able to, like I said earlier, pull back a bit. And I think it just made sense. Like, I want to start a family. I'd love to be able to spend, more time with friends and family myself. And I also I think that at my peak, I had 40 employees, and that's a lot of personalities to take care of, and you combine it with, take COVID, for example, where, you're stressed out, but then you're wearing all your employees' stresses too, because everyone's stressed simultaneously. And that I wore that quite heavily, because I care for the most part about, if you work for me, you're part of my family, and I cared about everyone's lives. So that was super draining as well. And Yeah, it was a lot, but 40 employees is the most I've ever had. And they
Wow.
also don't tell you when you're becoming an entrepreneur, like you can have a great idea and a great product, but they don't ever, there's no way to just learn how to manage people. That's something you learn over time. So
Right.
depending on when you worked for me in that 11-year kind of cycle, I was either the worst boss you ever had or the best boss, one or the two. But that's
Somewhere in
just
the
how life
spectrum.
works.
Somewhere definitely in the spectrum there.
Yeah, I had no idea how to be a boss, which is very different than owning a company. Like
Right.
I did not know how to manage people. Again, very different than being an entrepreneur.
And learning how to deal with human capital is a lot harder than learning with how to deal with monetary capital. And like you said, personalities, 40 people, you can have 40 distinctly different personalities, wants and needs during the day. So with all the lessons you have learned through your journey in the last 10 years, what's a couple of things of advice you would give a young entrepreneur or a new entrepreneur getting into the business?
Well, my grandfather's words to me were always work hard and be smart. And those are two very distinct things. The work hard is your energy, the work ethic you put into things. But then the be smart part is don't just work for work's sake. Make sure that you are working efficiently to improve tomorrow. And like the biggest accomplishment I could ever have in my own career is that I know I'm better at my job today than I was 10 years ago. And that is goes hand in hand with work hard, be smart.
Right.
And the other one is, you have to be a problem solver. You have to be able to look at a scenario and figure out how to fix things on the fly, because when you're starting out, there's no one to ask. It's literally you got to figure it out. Or I remember one time I was late for an event. My food truck didn't start. I called my buddy who's like a makeshift mechanic. He's like, I don't know, man, just take a hammer and start banging underneath the thing. And I fucking went underneath that thing and I'm banging away. And, not to say that was the right thing to do, but the moral of the story is if you are planning to become entrepreneurial, it is imperative that you understand that being a problem solver is probably your biggest asset.
Awesome. That's great advice. Both sets of that advice is great. I used to have to start a car with a hammer way back early in my career in the Army. And I used to have to go in there with a hammer to hit the starter to get it to go. So
Yeah.
I understand that pain very much.
So you're saying what I did was methodical. It was actually, I was trained. It was a trained thing.
Yeah, it was training thing. It was awesome. What's the best way for someone to get in contact with you if they want to either just chat with you, have you on their show, or get some advice?
Well, believe it or not, Instagram is the fastest way to get a hold of me, at Chef Matt Basile, all one word, on Instagram. It's the same if you go to the Chef Matt Basile Facebook page. Those two ways are easily the fastest way to get a hold of me to see what we're up to. Or you could just go to the Chef Matt Basile website, subscribe to our newsletter, and every time we post new content, new recipes, or new projects, you're always updated there first and foremost.
Awesome. Matt, thanks for taking some of your time to share your story with us and your trials and tribulations and your 10-year success right now.
It's my absolute pleasure to be here today. Thank you for this opportunity, and I wish you good weather, because
thank you.
Mediocre here at best.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Cheers, man.